And I got another email. Brian, this brought up, actually, this is something that we have never talked about. Because I'll read the email and then I'll say what we've never talked about. It's from Andrew, and he says, "Hi, Jim and Brian." Actually included you in this. "I have a question about lumberjack matches. Jim, do you have a sense of how the wrestlers outside the ring felt about them? Did they get bored or upset at having to hang out there instead of being able to be in the locker room? Or did wrestlers enjoy the opportunity to be part of that kind of match? I'm asking because I just watched Bob Backlund and Playboy Buddy Rose have a lumberjack match, and one of the wrestlers outside the ring was superstar Billy Graham. I can't imagine he was thrilled to be there. Thanks so much."
1982 Billy Graham.
Yeah. He wasn't thrilled to be anywhere at that particular point. But this is something that we have actually not, it hadn't come up. Is that now, well, they don't do lumberjack matches anymore, I don't think at all. And we'll talk about the origin and the variations of them in a second. But they still do battle royals, and it's kind of the same thing. You know, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure by the plethora of battle royals and or multiple man matches these days, I think the boys actually enjoy them. Now, it's a chance to go out and do more cool stuff. When you got to the goddamn building in the territory days and saw the lineup and saw that there was a battle royal, if you didn't already know it, your enthusiasm for the night immediately fucking plummeted, right? Because a battle royal was, in a lot of cases, that was a way to soup up a weak card. Or a spot show. You didn't pay the wrestlers twice for working twice if it was a battle royal. So if you had a fucking spot show with 8 guys on it, and then the main event, you know, said 2 singles, 1 tag, and a battle royal, the people get their money's worth and you get double labor as a promoter. And you get double work as a wrestler. And, you know, I'm not talking about the big annual San Francisco or Los Angeles Battle Royal in their day when they drew big houses and everybody's money was up because of it and it was a big deal. I'm talking about generally, you know, for the most part, in most territories, Battle Royal night sucked. And, you know, there was that phase that is 72 through 74. Where they invented the 2-ring battle royal, and it went through to every territory. And they monkeyed with the rules a little bit. Sometimes the last guy in each ring fought, and other times everybody had to be thrown from ring 1 to ring 2 and then thrown to the blah, 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 whatever. But that picked things up a little bit because it was something new. And then they did too many of those, and it was, I remember one time, I think Nick Goulas had 3 2-ring battle royals in when he was still technically in charge of the company here in Louisville. Well, he wasn't in charge of Louisville, but you know, Goulas Welch Wrestling in a 6-month period in Louisville at one point. It was just battle royal crazy. But anyway, the lumberjack matches were kind of the same thing in that, especially for other top guys that were in programs, to have a lumberjack match, you had to have at least 8 or 10 guys around the ring or it looked stupid, right? And sometimes they'd say, oh, there's 16 men around the ring. So then you're basically using everybody else on the card, except maybe if there's a main event title match or whatever the fuck, the guys with the pull to not be in the lumberjack match weren't in the lumberjack match. Otherwise, it was everybody's duty. And the preliminary guys were pissed off in most places. You like in Louisiana and Mid-South for Watts, all the wrestlers had to stay till the end of the night, till the end of the show. Whether first match or last match, whatever. The reason for that was because honestly, Watts wanted all the underneath guys to watch the main event guys and learn something, but also the underneath heels would stay out of respect to help the main event heels fight the crowd on the way back, and the underneath baby faces would stay in case usually they were riding with a top baby face, or in case shit really went south, or if somebody got hurt in one of the last two matches and needed fill in, whatever the fuck. But in a lot of territories, when you were done, you could leave. So the preliminary guys are thinking, oh, fuck, I'm got to be out there the last match. I'm going to be an hour and a half farther from home, or I could be out in the parking lot and backseat of the car getting a blowjob or whatever the fuck. And the top guys, if there were any in the mix, are out there kind of malingering because it's not their program, it's not their angle, and they're being made to be one of the boys with the underneath guys, and it doesn't look good for them to be standing around out there. And generally a lumberjack match would be last of the evening. But so that meant that they've already been seen in their program, in their angle, whatever light they're going to be seen in. Now they got to come out and play second fiddle to somebody else. Does that make any sense, Brian, when guys thought about themselves as stars and how they were viewed by the fans instead of just, hey, kids, let's put on a show?
Yeah. And I mean, when you would see a lumberjack match, you wouldn't see, typically, I mean, maybe if it was a Saturday night's main event or something, it would be different, but you wouldn't see a Hulk Hogan. You wouldn't see a Bruno Sammartino. You'd see lots of Brian Blairs and various people from the card, but not the world champion or top guy.
Right. But in the territories, when it was a smaller talent roster and whatever, unless you were the booker, maybe Dusty, whatever, in Florida, you kind of had to usually go out. So anyway,
Go ahead. Do you like your lumberjacks wearing flannel?
Well, that's what I was going to say. A lot of people may not even understand what the fuck is a lumberjack match. They don't do them that much anymore. And I don't know that anybody has done the history. It's not like they've tried to track down where was the first cage match and they come up with a fishnet in Galveston, Texas in the 30s or fucking chicken wire wherever. But a lumberjack match, obviously, one would think that it maybe in the Northwest or in Canada, Joe LeDuc was the Canadian Lumberjack, but it has to go back to the 40s, I would imagine. And wherever you had, lumber, like a coal miner's glove match didn't get over in fucking Texas, there were no coal miners. So you would think it would be in an area where they had a lumber industry and or the local lore featured lumberjacks. But they would switch them around. Like, remember Bruiser in the early 70s in Chicago and wherever, they promoted a human cage match where the ring will be surrounded by wrestlers, and it'll be like a human cage to keep the guys in. But the story was that in the lumber camps, in the days gone by, when the two lumberjacks had a fucking beef, they would get in a fight, and all the other guys in the lumber camp would be in a circle surrounding them, and nobody was allowed to leave till it was over. They'd throw them back in. And that was a simple enough explanation. And then you get a guy with some type of lumberjack gimmick that might fit, and that helps even better. And they did those for years. And then every once in a while, they would soup it up a little bit, like the lumberjacks with straps, which I was involved in 40 years ago in my rookie year in the business. That goddamn... You've seen the tape of me and Adrian Street and Miss Linda against Dundee at the Cook Convention Center in Memphis, right?
Yeah, it was on one of your compilations, yeah.
Yes, where my whole fucking face got bashed open. The goddamn deal with, here's again, the guys being lumberjacks didn't necessarily like the lumberjack matches because they had to be out there in somebody else's shit and blah, blah, blah. But at least, not only would they would work with you, and you would have an equal number of baby faces and heels. So during the match, the heel would want to hide behind his friends from his locker room and avoid punishment. And then later on, when the heel's getting heat and he throws the baby face out, well, the baby face is supposed to be maligned and assaulted by the heels before the other baby face can get around there and stop them. And that gets the heat up. And then at the end of it, all the lumberjacks get in a big schmoz with each other, and while in the ring, the guys involved go into their big slam-bang finish, as Toots Mondt would say. Well, then they start modifying the things. And in Tennessee, again, they started, and it was kind of a modified country whipping match from World Class. But the Lumberjacks, there wouldn't be as many of them at ringside, but sometimes it would only be baby faces to keep the heel in, but they would have leather straps and basically belts that they would whip the fucking heels until they got back in the ring. And I think Paul Lee at one point, maybe Eddie Gilbert even did a fucking fans lumberjack deal where they gave real fans belts. And
no, that was Goodhart. Joel Goodhart.
That was Goodhart.
Terry Funk versus Lawler, I think.
Yes, God damn it. Oh my God. So, well, if the fans couldn't hit as hard as some of the boys when they're fucking with you. But anyway, so we have that match in Memphis with me and Adrian and Linda against Dundee. And the Lumberjacks are Jerry Lawler, Terry Taylor, Stan Lane, and Steve Keirn, the Fabulous Ones. And that was we had the Lumberjack strap matches for 2 weeks, every fucking night except Sunday. So we were getting a shit whipped out of us, right? But this was like one of the first ones. And I just smartened up because they weren't good. The Lumberjacks, being baby faces, they weren't going to whip Linda hard, or if at all, they were going to work it out of respect because she's a woman and she's Adrian's wife. And they weren't going to whip Adrian outrageously, although they were going to get the gimmick over because they all knew that Adrian could stretch. Well, he could stretch Terry Taylor, Lawler, and Stan probably with no issue, and it would take him 2 or 3 minutes to stretch Keirn. So they weren't going to fuck with Adrian. They were just going to work the gimmick. So it fell to me as the rookie manager and the only one who could whip anybody involved. They were going to beat the shit out of me and fuck with me, right? So I knew by this point from the first couple to wear 2 pairs of sweatpants with a pair of wrestling trunks underneath and 3 T-shirts, one on top of another. Which is why if you see any more of those tapes, Dundee's always trying to rip my shirt off so that they can whip my bare back. But I'm wearing all this shit, and they're still laying them in. And after 2 weeks, I looked like Hamburger, right? It was fucking ridiculous. But I'm trying to fucking weasel my way back into the ring every time I roll out or I get on the apron. And then I turn around and Keirn, somebody has given Keirn the worst one, because Keirn will take all the goddamn liberties that he wants to take, right? That son of a gun. Some fan in the front row has given him a big, thick, like 3-inch leather belt with metal studs on it. Now he's got the regular working belt, plus a big one. He's got one in both hands. He's windmilling them. Then, at that point, Dundee decides I hadn't taken enough bumps outside to get whipped. So he grabs me and starts throwing me out of the ring. And all he says is, "Take a bump out." About halfway to the ropes, I realized that nobody had ever thrown me out of the ring before. This is like my fucking 12th wrestling match. And 4 of those were against Jimmy Hart. And so I know my head's got to go through first, but I don't really know what to do from there. This is one thing I've never broken down and studied. But it didn't matter anyway, because Dundee had grabbed the collar of all 3 of my T-shirts and the waistband of all 3 of my fucking trousers and just pitched me. And his Buddy Wayne spot show ring and the ropes were like rubber bands. So when I went through over the second rope and under the top rope and bowed it out and it snapped back, I went upside down, boom, my side of my face hits the edge of the apron, which had no padding on it, because it was Buddy Wayne's spot show ring and the boards were like that on the side. And it lays my face open. And then when I land, I see the blood shooting out about a foot out of my face every time my heart beats. And I'm like, oh, fuck. And Terry Taylor comes over and fucking draws back to whip me and gets this look on his face and turns around and walks off because he's kind of disgusted. And I crawl back in the ring. And Miss Linda says, "Jim, your nose is bleeding." I says, "Not my nose." So a second later, while I'm over on the apron, and now Adrian's trying to get some heat on Dundee. And Dundee comes back and fucking tries to chase Miss Linda. And I didn't see what happened. But I hear this big fucking pop from the crowd, this big cheer reaction. And I look over and there's Linda face down on the mat and she's covering her hood in her hands. And I'm like, oh my God, she's hurt. And I go over now, I'm bleeding all over her because my cheek is opened up where you can lay your fucking index finger in it. And I bend over and say, Linda, are you all right? And I see she's laughing. Dundee was trying to pull her into the ring, grabbed her tights and pulled her tights as she had fishnet stockings on and these like moolah style wrestling tights. And it pulled her tights up in, how can I say this, Brian? It gave her the world's biggest camel toe. And and she was hanging over the middle rope when he pulled her goddamn tights up like that. And the whole east side of ringside of the Cook Convention Center saw, do they have caverns in fucking England? I would say Mammoth Cave, but it wouldn't. Oh, but it was, she's laughing because it was the worst. She said it was a horrible shot. So all the people started laughing. So she's laying there trying to get her shit pulled out from under her thing. And Dundee's done that. Now Adrian's on him. I'm bleeding all over everybody. And then I got to wait through the rest of the match where Adrian gets the heat and then Dundee makes a comeback and beats all of us. That was the night that I had to wait to go get fucking sewn up at the hospital until Jimmy Hart got painted yellow. So then the lumberjack matches that we had in Crockett, Dusty came up with a great idea in that he gave all the lumberjacks in the Midnight Express matches tennis rackets. So, but the thing is, they were tennis rackets with, did you ever see any of the tapes of those matches? They were rackets without the covers. They were just, you could see the strings.
Right.
So they hurt worse than my racket because the guys didn't know how to fucking work with them, but they didn't make any noise like my racket did because they didn't have covers on them. And that's how we kind of kept, because if 8 guys had been out there swinging rackets making the same noise as mine did and guys still had to live through the match, that would have made no sense. So nobody ever actually really picked up. The fans didn't say anything, but that's what the difference was, or I would have objected to giving everybody my gimmick, and Dusty knew that. And then I stole that for Smoky Mountain Wrestling when I had the big match between me and Bullet Bob after the hospitalization angle, where all 4 of my guys, the Bruise Brothers and the Heavenly Bodies, and all 4 of Bob's guys, the Rock and Roll Express, and his sons, Scott and Steve, had tennis rackets around the ring to keep me from, or him allegedly, from running off and escaping. And it worked because it was tailored to the people involved in the match. But yeah, for the most part, battle royals and lumberjack matches were not popular with any of the talent that had to be around ringside being supporting players if they weren't just the guy in the first match anyway. And even then, he wasn't getting an extra payoff, and it was keeping him out of the parking lot where he might get an extra payoff. But now I think that all these guys just are honored and impressed and love to be pressed into service in any fashion whatsoever. I used to tell guys in wrestling school, yeah, be available, be ready to do anything for free and on the sperm of the moment because you're in school. This is what you want to do. But once guys in the territory days got there and had a level of comfort, they didn't like having to be involved in other people's gaga.
What do you think of the Lumberjill match?
Oh, and yes, and that was such a cute little play on words. Again, stipulations should be few and far between, probably in most wrestling anymore these days, because they've all been prostituted. And I guess I shouldn't say that like that when we're talking about to mention a girl stipulation, but they've all been worn out. And when you do stipulations in girls' matches, then that should be even fewer and farther between amongst a select few, because then it's the moonsault theory. When Muta was the only one to do the moonsault, it was the coolest thing in the world. Then Vader did a moonsault. Shit, now a 400-pound guy can do a moonsault. Then fucking Terry Funk did it. Now a 55-year-old guy can do a moonsault. Then the fucking midget started. Now the midget can do a moonsault. Then the girl started. Now a girl can do a moonsault. Now everybody does a goddamn moonsault. I got one more battle royal story, and we'll be done. Do you know what a Titanic battle royal is?
I have never heard of that stipulation. No.
Well, there was one night in Tupelo, Mississippi, the boys decided they were going to have a Titanic battle royal, and it was one of those deals where it was an 8-man battle royal at the end of the night. Stretch the card out, right? And it's Tupelo to begin with. And it was still Eddie Marlin's town. He hadn't sold it to that woman in fucking Amory, Mississippi yet. But anyway, so Eddie Marlin is the guy's, he's sitting up at the front door at the ticket booth selling tickets, right? But they were short an announcer, so they make Eddie be the announcer that night. So Eddie would go up and he'd announce the match, and then the timekeeper would ring the bell, and then Eddie'd go and sit back down at the front door at the ticket booth. And then his normal habit when he would do this was he'd come back during the main event, he would count up the tickets and the money and do the settlement. So on this night, it's the Battle Royal. He goes up there, he introduces it, they ring the bell. He gets out of the ring. He walks back to the front door, sits down at the fucking ticket table there, and he heard the bell ringing to stop the match. They'd already finished. And by the time he walked back to the table and sat down, it was a Titanic battle royal. That means everybody bails overboard. And it was just a mass mutiny. It's like, fuck this town and fuck this battle royal. And goddamn it. They said, and that was the same.
They needed
town.
They needed lumberjacks that night.
Well, but all the lumberjacks were in the ring doing the battle royal. That was the same town, Tupelo, Mississippi. Jimmy Kent, the manager, was in a loser leave town match in Tupelo one Friday night. If his team, the Bounty Hunters, whoever lost the match, Jimmy Kent had to leave town, and he pulled up next to the building where all the fans saw him before the show with a U-Haul behind his car and his wife and family inside. So people got a pretty good fucking clue.